I think all of you should get a standing ovation. Thank you, thank you, thank you, all of you, for all the band that showed up early this morning, and all the volunteers who've been here, and all of you for making the effort to be here. I really, really, really appreciate it. I had a bet going that we'd have 6 people. So we beat that. Even first service, we beat that. So, and I want to say a special thank you to Betty Ellison for filling in for me last week that I could be away. Yeah. Betty had a good message to share, and she really launched us into this Lenten season with something for us to think about. And this is a time for us to be reflecting on our lives and to look within to see how we might become more faithful people, better people in terms of how we live our lives. And she got us off to a good start on that. And there was, I got a draft of her message several weeks before she shared it, and there was something that really jumped out at me, which was really the hinge pan of her service. And she said this, what if we think about giving up on things that drain our energy, or actively seek out things that give us energy so that we can be the people God wants us to be? I really like that, and I think that's an important thing for us to think about. How do we get recharged physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually? At about the same time I saw her draft come through, I saw something that Lynn Sweet had posted on Facebook. Lynn Sweet is a theologian, an author, a speaker, a professor, and you can name all kinds of other things under that too. He actually has spoken at the Garden at one point, lots of years ago. But Lynn posted something on Facebook about what it would be for us to be fully alive people. And he named about being alive with love and with gratitude and with hope, being alive with courage and all of those kinds of things. And I started thinking about what Betty had said about being aware of the things that drain us and moving those aside, and then focusing on the things that give us energy, and about what it means to be a fully alive person. Thinking that that might be something for us to think about together as we move on through this Lenten season to the time we get to Easter. Because there really is an important matter of trying to be alive in whatever way we possibly can. And that's the journey we're on in this particular time. It's important for us, I think, in order to figure this out, to think about the things that we might just say would be negative, to those things that drain us, so that we can avoid them. And for me, one of the biggest things, at least, I don't know about you, but for me it is negativity. Negativity kind of sucks the lifeblood out of us, I think, at times. And we had a perfect example of that if you were here a couple weeks ago when we talked about our friend Eeyore. Eeyore, the old gray donkey, who is, pretty much despondent and kind of down about everything, and he drags everybody down around him, and he doesn't seem to be able to be grateful for all the people that are around him that try to support him, that try to encourage him. Gratitude is simply not a part of his being. And maybe he's not all that different from some of us in some ways, because what I read somewhere that the human brain is actually, some believe, wired for negativity, for a negative bias. In other words, we tend to think the worst instead of the best. We tend to see the bad and not always see the good that's there. And so it's important to realize that for us to overcome that, if that is in fact true, it takes some intentionality. It really takes some determination to help ourselves really look for that which is good and that which is positive. So that's what I want us to think about today. How do we become people that are a little more grateful and not be like those who are not very grateful? Which is sort of what our Bible passage is talking about. It's a story that the writer of Luke's Gospel tells. Well, let's look at it together. As Jesus made his way to Jerusalem, he went along the border between Samaria and Galilee. He was going into a village when he was met by 10 men suffering from a dreaded skin disease. They stood at a distance and shouted, "Jesus, Master, have pity on us." Jesus saw them and said to them, "Go and let the priests examine you." On the way, they were made clean. When one of them saw that he was healed, he came back, praising God in a loud voice. He threw himself to the ground at Jesus' feet and thanked him. The man was a Samaritan. Jesus spoke up. "There were 10 who were healed. Where are the other 9? Why is this foreigner the only one who came back to give thanks to God?" And Jesus said to him, "Get up and go. Your faith has made you well." Well, there's some things that might be helpful to know in this particular passage. At the beginning, it says that Jesus was going along the border between Galilee and Samaria. Samaritans were considered to be outcast people. They were defiled, and people went out of their way. They would not go through Samaria. They would go out of their way to avoid all Samaritans. And so they were definitely the outcasts. And then to multiply it, there's another set of outcasts here, and those were the lepers. And we're told that they called out to Jesus from afar because they were kept isolated from other people, because it was considered to be that their disease was so communicable that they were kept apart from everyone else. And so they called out to him. And Jesus tells them to go to the priest. He notices them, he responds to them, tells them to go to the priest. And so the 10 of them start off merrily on their way. And then one of them realizes that he's been healed and turns around and comes back. 1 out of 10. Not exactly a great percentage. I wonder where we would have been in that story. When I hear something like that, I always try to put myself in that story. Would we have turned around and come back and said thank you? Thanks, and given praise to God for the healing that's taken place? Or we would have skipped merrily along, moving on down toward the priest as we've been told to do. Well, I suspect most of us would like to think, at least, that we would turn around and say thanks, that we would go back and acknowledge the incredible gift and blessings that we've had. But, we never truly know, I suppose. Maybe one of the ways we could kind of get a gauge of what we might do is just to think about how we look at life and the people in our lives and the experiences that come our way. Because if we are able to be appreciative of every moment in life, then my guess is we turn around and go back. And if you stop to think about it, we need to realize every moment is precious. Every moment is a gift. We are overwhelmed with all kinds of blessings if we just begin to look at it that way. But sometimes I fear that we fail to even acknowledge the blessings that we have, much less be appreciative for them and being grateful for them. Now, I know sometimes life kind of gets in the way, and it's hard to find the good and the blessings that are there. Sometimes we're in pain, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual pain. And it is hard to get beyond that pain to see the good that's there. Or maybe we're at a place in our lives where we're facing incredible challenges, where it seems as though everyone's against us, that we're just struggling to keep our heads above water to try to overcome the challenges that face us. And yet I can't help but think that if we would find that little bit of good, that little bit of blessing, that positive piece there, it would totally change our outlook and make our challenges, our struggles, seem a little less difficult and help us to really move forward. I know people, and I bet you do too, who have very little as the world measures it, and yet who are extremely grateful people for everything they have. And there are those who have way more than the rest of the world, or overcome with all of the things they have, again, by the world's measurements, who don't seem to have an ounce of gratitude in it. What makes the difference there? You see, being people who are grateful is really a better way to live. It does help us feel better about ourselves. It helps us be happier people. It helps us face life with more joy and more enthusiasm. So how do we go about becoming more grateful? How do we let gratitude just be a part of our being? Well, this morning I'd like for us to really focus on that, and I'd like to suggest that maybe we together do a little exercise here. Are you game? You willing to do it? It's not hard, promise. It's not a tough one. You don't have to do, headstands or anything. So it's not difficult like that. Just for a moment, close your eyes. Let's all close our eyes. And take a deep breath and think about the breath we're taking. Think about the air, the life-giving air that's coming into our bodies, going into our lungs and giving us life. Listen for a moment and hear the thumping of our hearts, realizing it's pumping the blood through this body, which is a miracle in and of itself. And now let's open our eyes and look at the people around us. Maybe there's someone special, a loved one who's with us. Or maybe we just see these other gardeners who are here, who've worked to be here, and who are here to help support one another. You see, it's a matter of looking in a different way, of really being aware of all that life brings us, of really valuing and appreciating it. It's a habit we have to form. We have to practice it to being more open, more grateful people, by being more aware of all the wonder and all the blessings that come our way. I really like something G.K. Chesterton said. He wrote these words, "You say grace before meals, all right, but I say grace before the concert and the opera, and grace before the play and pantomime, and grace before I open a book, and grace before sketching, painting, swimming, fencing, boxing, walking, playing, dancing, and grace before I dip the pen in the ink." What would it be like, I wonder, if we were like Chesterton? What if we thought of grace? Grace is when we say thanks, when we express our gratitude. If we were grace-filled people who expressed our gratitude before we opened our eyes in the morning, before we started our car, before we picked up the fork and began to take a first bite. All it takes is looking around us and realizing the incredible ways in which life has blessed us, God has blessed us, if we're just aware of it and look for it. I wonder what it would be like if we really disciplined ourselves enough to write down the things for which we're grateful, to log those things. I mentioned to you some time back that on Facebook several months ago now, there was this gratitude challenge that went around, that people were asked to write down 3 things a day for which they were grateful. And for some it went on 10 days, for some it was 100 days. But I wonder what it would be like if we made that a daily habit. Certainly it would be nice if we wrote it down, but even if just mentally we clocked it in our minds, what are 3 things we're grateful for? My hunch is our list would far outnumber 3 things when we develop that attitude of gratitude, and it would make a real difference in how we live our lives. You know, when I think about gratitude, I think about my mom and the last words she spoke to me before she died. She had had a stroke, and there was a second stroke unfolding in her body, but we didn't really realize, at least at the time, that it would be the end. And I remember that she looked at me and she simply said, "Thanks for everything." I hope that when we all get to that point in our lives, we can truly say, thanks. Thanks for life. Thanks for everything.